Good morning again, and welcome to my library. Before we get started, there are a couple of things I'd like to go over with you. I know you're probably interested to know about the test, and I would like to give it at 2 o'clock. I've sent you an email about this. Give it to you at 2 o'clock on Tuesday, the way we did last time. I think this would work for the students in the United States and in Germany. If you're not okay with it, Torben and Chiara, I could move it up to 1 o'clock here, and that will be 8 o'clock in the evening where you are. I have to remind myself that nobody can have much of a social life right now, so I'm hoping 2 o'clock on Tuesday will work for you. And I would post it at 9 o'clock that night for the students in China and Korea, which would be early morning the next day for them. Or I might try to post it earlier, but no, I think that would work better. Okay, the test will be based on 3 things mainly. The text of the play, and I've tried to go over it with you, I've assigned it for you to read, and of course the movie. The movie will be very crucial. If you do not watch the movie, you will have a hard time with the test. If you do not read the text, you will have a hard time with the test. And if you do not watch my videos, you will have a hard time with the test. I'm also going to add on a section for AP students. This means all AP students, not just those planning to take the test. And those of you planning to take the test, I will be sending you an email very shortly. I believe you will be taking it on May 12th. And I had an email from Mrs. Mayo about that, and I'll try to get more information for you. Later today, I'm going to send you a document that has notes that would be helpful, and also the the diagram that I showed you. There we go. That has the parts. Okay, so it was upside down. Never mind. And up in the top, you can see I have written some themes as follows. Things we need to consider in Oedipus: fate and free will. To what extent are things predetermined? Do we have a chance? Wisdom and knowledge. And this is echoed throughout the play by themes of light and darkness, of blindness and seeing. Another theme could be determination. Power, that comes in. And of course, memory and the past. This will be on the handout I send you, and I will show you the 5 or 6 aspects. You have the exposition, which is pretty much what's happening that puts you in the frame at the beginning. You know, who are the characters, what's going on. In Oedipus, it's pretty much the fact that the people are coming and they are asking Oedipus for help because there's a terrible plague. Nothing is fruitful. The plants, the animals, the people, really bad. And the turning point here would be when Creon comes back from Delphi and says the problem is that there has been a murder and they have to stop that pollution. Then you have the rising action until you get excuse me, to the climax. And the climax is when Oedipus finally sees it all. And then it's not even. The climax isn't in the middle of the play. Then you have the falling action here. And this is what happens after the climax and before the resolution. And the resolution, or I have the word here, denouement, which means unknotting in French. This means, what's the outcome? And the outcome for Oedipus is that he is, of course, banished, blind, wretched, and he's going back to the mountain where he had been abandoned as a child, expecting to die there. Now, they usually talk about the Theban plays of Sophocles, and the 3 that they mention are Oedipus, Antigone, and Oedipus at Colonus. At the end of the play Oedipus, you may remember that he asked to see his 2 daughters, Ismene and Antigone. And it happens that after Oedipus dies, his 2 sons fight to be king, Eteocles and Polynices. And because they had entered into fraternal war, caused a lot of deaths, Creon, who has now become king, says that Polynices, I believe it is, can't be buried. Well, the Greeks felt this was a terrible thing because unless they were buried, their souls could never be at rest. And anybody who buries Polynices will be killed. Well, Antigone, his sister, insists on breaking the law, and Creon condemns her to death, and you have another mess. But before that happens, there's a play called Oedipus at Colonus, and in this, Antigone is looking after her father, and Oedipus dies, and he becomes a sort of a lower level god. So he has a sort of a happy ending. Now I need to pause this so I can go and blow my... And here we are again. Yesterday I talked to you about Oedipus's tragic flaw, and don't forget the word hamartia, the term from archery that means just missing the mark. The reality is that often our bad qualities are the flip side of our good qualities. You know, we might be people who are very caring and we want to help other people, but the flip side of that could be that we become very bossy and overbearing. We could be people who have great determination and tenacity, but that could also have the flip side of stubbornness. And you know, one of the suggestions was that I ask you, and it's in this book here, what is your strongest character trait? Now, I don't expect you to answer that this minute, but think about it. Your teachers might be interested in helping you with that, though actually we probably don't know. Your strongest character trait, and what are the positive aspects of that trait? Well, I tried to give you some examples just there, and of course, inevitably, one thinks of oneself, and not necessarily very happily. So, what are the positive aspects of your dominant trait, and what are some potential negative aspects of that trait? How could your strength conceivably become a liability? Well, you know, we have the same thing with Oedipus. It's not that he's a bad person, but the ideal hero, according to Aristotle in the Poetics, keep that in mind, is that it should be a man who is not entirely good, not entirely bad. In other words, someone like the rest of us, because you want to elicit pity and fear, which bring about a catharsis, a kind of a flushing out of your emotions. I read a thing yesterday that said the Property Brothers are renovating something for Brad Pitt, and it would just make you cry, and crying is cathartic. And I thought, well, you know, you kind of need to know that word even just for reading kind of stupid stuff. No, I didn't check it out, so I don't know why his renovation would make me weep. But talking about Oedipus, yes, he's rash, he's impetuous, he has a certain arrogance. You know, he answered the riddle of the Phoenix. He managed to leave Corinth so he wouldn't kill his father and marry his mother. But his pride to some extent is justified. He has done great things. He's honored. He is well respected. He jumps to conclusions, yes, and has a very quick anger. We see this in his killing Laius. You know, as I said, the first case of road rage that we know of. But many people would say his insistence is probably his desire for knowledge. Now, that's not a bad thing. I want to know the truth. I want to know the facts. But in his case, it leads to horror and tragedy. So the insistence on learning the truth, extending his knowledge to discover and he needs enlightenment. But Oedipus learns something that is almost too hard to bear. But then again, Oedipus is a noble character, and this is required by Aristotle's Poetics, and a noble character is sort of not a superhuman person, but he is a person of great ability. Okay, so we've talked about that. And again, I go back to asking you, what would you say is your great character, excuse me, characteristic, and are there positive aspects to that and negative? Now, I'd just like to wind up with this note from the text, well, from some notes I have. Are the gods just to Oedipus? Has he deserved his catastrophic fate? Well, that's the question. Too much has been written on the subject already, but we might well remember that these are not the questions we usually ask about great interpretive literature. Now, I hope you remember back when we did the short story and we talked about commercial literature and interpretive literature, and the interpretive gives us understanding. The questions mean, has poetic justice been served? Have the good been rewarded and the wicked punished? Well, no. We might as well ask, does suffering always bring wisdom? And does wisdom always bring happiness? Well, let me give you those two questions again. Does suffering always bring wisdom? And does wisdom always bring happiness? Key word there is always. Perhaps rather than asking for poetic justice or for philosophical truisms, we need to bear always in mind that although Oedipus is almost godlike in wisdom, he is human, and that although his sufferings are terrifying, he bears them with courage and determination that are themselves almost godlike. And in another play, as I said about the end of his life, he is rewarded with elevation to the status of immortal demigod, second-level god. Sophocles is not writing a play about the acts of the gods, just or unjust, or about an intrinsic relationship among suffering, wisdom, and happiness. His subject is a great man who loyally does his duty to others and to his own need to know himself. I repeat that. His subject is a great man who loyally does his duty to others and to his own need to know himself. Such men are not always happy. Well, Alexander Pope says, when ignorance is bliss, 'tis folly to be wise. But those of us who are teachers, we don't believe that it's folly to be wise. We would rather be wise than happy and stupid. But we'd like to be happy and wise, really. All right, now, just going back to the text, I'd like to go through some lines with you and, some critical aspects. When we stopped yesterday, Jocasta had realized when they said about the infant's feet being bound or pierced. I don't know exactly how they did that. I may try to find out. But she goes into she keeps pleading with Oedipus not to keep asking questions. Then she goes into the palace. And the Corrigo said, well, are we concerned? She went in. She seems upset. But Oedipus has mistakenly thought that she doesn't want to find out about his birth, because if he is lowborn, then that would be upsetting to her because she would be too snobbish. And he just doesn't realize that that has nothing to do with it. Jocasta has recognized that the baby that she and her husband put out on the hillside, because there was a prophecy that he would kill his father, had not died, but had grown up and had in fact killed his father and had come and married her, and they have 4 children based on this incest. Now there's I'm looking on page 1261, and we have the Ode 3 and the chorus. They can't seem to wrap their minds around what's going on, and they ask the gods for help and to come quickly. Then 1262, scene 4. Here we have Oedipus asking the chorus, do you know the man, this shepherd that the messenger told me about? Well, the shepherd comes and he's asked, well, were you a servant of Laius? And he says, yes, most of my life. And where did you pasture the sheep? And he says, Keteron, or the hills nearby. And Oedipus says to him, do you know this man? Meaning the messenger. And the shepherd says, no, nope, at least not to my recollection. And the messenger said, well, that's strange. He had 2 herds, I had 1, and we would shepherd them together from March to September, and then we would go their own ways. I'd go back to Corinth, he'd go back to Thebes, to King Laius. And he says, isn't that true? The shepherd says, yes, but it was a long time ago. And then the messenger says, don't you remember giving me a baby boy? Well, this is not something you could easily forget. Shepherd says, what if I did? What are you trying to say? And then the messenger, with his unctuous charm, says, King Oedipus was once that little child. And the shepherd says, damn you, hold your tongue, because the shepherd recognizes the situation and has recognized it all along. If you remember, when he came back after surviving the massacre of Laius and his entourage, by the time he got back to Thebes, the queen had married Oedipus. And of course, this shepherd knew that he had been asked to put the baby on the hillside to die because of the prophecy. And he had realized when he saw Oedipus on the throne that the prophecy had come to pass. He had seen this person kill his father and now become king and marry Jocasta. Top of 1263, the shepherd says, what did I do wrong? And Oedipus, you haven't answered the questions. And the shepherd says, the messenger doesn't know, he's only making trouble. And Oedipus has to kind of drag it out of him. Did you give the man the child he speaks of? I did, the shepherd says, and I would to God I had died that very day. And Oedipus gets kind of tough. You'll die now unless you speak the truth. Yet if I speak the truth, I am worse than dead. Then Oedipus gestures to an attendant to lay hands on the shepherd. He intends to draw it out apparently, and the shepherd shrinks from that and says, no, I've told you already, I gave him the boy. Where did you get him? From your house? From somewhere else? No, a man gave him to me. Is that man here? Whose house did he belong to? And the shepherd again begs, don't ask me any more. You're a dead man if I have to ask you again. He says, then the child was from the palace of Laius, a slave child or a child of his own line. And the poor shepherd says, I am on the brink of dreadful speech. And right at that moment, Oedipus says, and I of dreadful hearing, yet I must hear. Now, I think this is very, very probably the climax of the play. It has all fallen into place for Oedipus. If you must be told, then, they said it was Laius' child. But it is your wife who can tell you about that. My wife, did she give it to you? She did. Why? I was told to get rid of it. Oh, heartless mother. But in dread of prophecies, it wasn't that Jocasta wanted to expose her baby boy to death. It was said the boy would kill his own father. Then he said, why did you give him to this old man? Well, the shepherd in his weakness said, I pitied the baby, my king, and I thought that this man would take him far away to his own country. He saved him, yes, but for what a fate. But if you are what this man says you are, no man living is more wretched than Oedipus. Oedipus says, God, it was true, all the prophecies. Now and then, O light, may I look on you for the last time. 1264. I, Oedipus damned in his birth, in his marriage damned in the blood he shed with his own hand. Damned in his birth, in his marriage, and in killing his father. And he rushes into the palace. Well, the chorus can't ignore the reality anymore. And at the end of the first strophe on page 1264, there is very much the reversal. Remember we said in a tragedy, very often there's a reversal. And he says, "Oh, who shall make this thought stay on, that down time drifts away? Your splendor is all fallen, O naked brow of wrath and tears, O change of Oedipus. I who saw your days call no man blessed. Your great days, like ghosts, are gone." And they say, "The mind was a strong bow. Deep, how deep you drew it then, hard archer." This would be the gods, "at a dim, fearful range, and brought dear glory down." And he goes on 1265, the chorus, strophe 2, "And now of all men ever known, most pitiful is this man's story. His fortunes are most changed, his state fallen to a low slave's, ground bitter fate. O Oedipus, most royal one, that great door that expelled you to the light," this is his birth, "gave at night, gave night to your glory, as to the father, to the fathering son, all understood too late." And the next one, "Child by Laius doomed to die, then doomed to lose that fortunate little death. Would God you never took breath on this air, that with wailing lips I take to cry. For I weep the world's outcast. I was blind, and now I can tell why. Asleep, for you had given ease of breath to Thebes, while the false years went by." Now this is the chorus speaking and saying, we were kind of in a fool's paradise while the false years went by. Now then we have the Exodus, which is when the chorus is preparing to leave. And the first scene, the second messenger comes in and is aghast. "Elders of Thebes, what horrors are yours to see and hear, what weight of sorrow to be endured. If true to your birth you venerate the time of Labdacus, I think neither," well, he goes on, "evil not done unconsciously, but willed the greatest griefs, line 1184, "the greatest griefs are those we cause ourselves." And I have to say that looking back at my own life, there's a lot of truth in that. And they said, "How can there be any more grief?" And they say, "The queen is dead, but at whose hand?" And he says, "I can't tell for sure, but when she left us in passionate silence, she went through the house, her hair clutched in the fingers of both hands, went into the bedroom where her son was conceived, the son who would bring her father's death, and heard her wail for the double fruit of her marriage, a husband by her husband, children by her child. I don't know exactly how she died. She would not let us stay with her. Oedipus stormed the room. He went begging his sword, hunting the wife who was not his wife, and it was none of us aided him. But he hurled himself against the doors of the bedroom and managed to break the bolts." And bottom of page 1266, "And there we saw her hanging, her body swaying from the cruel cord she had noosed about her neck. A great sob broke from him, heartbreaking to hear, as he loosened the rope and lowered her to the ground. I would blot out from my mind what happened next, for the king ripped from her gown the golden brooches that were her ornament, and raised them and plunged them down straight into his own eyeballs, crying, 'No more, no more shall you look in that misery about me, the horrors of my own doing. Too long you have known the faces of those whom I should never have seen, too long been blind to those for whom I was searching. From this hour go in darkness.' And as he spoke, he struck his eyes, not once with many times, and the blood splattered his beard, bursting from his ruined sockets like red hail. The old happiness of the house of Labdacus was happiness enough. Where is it today? It is all wailing and ruin, disgrace, death. All the misery of mankind that has a name, and it is wholly and forever theirs. Is he still in agony? He's asking for someone to open the doors wide so that all of the children of Cadmus, all the people of Thebes, can see his father's murderer, his mother's, no, I cannot say it. And then he will leave Thebes self-exiled in order that the curse which he himself pronounced may depart from the house. He is weak and there is none to lead him. So terrible is his suffering. And then Oedipus, blinded, is led in. And the chorus is just appalled, dreadful to see. Never have I seen anything so terrible. And they say to Oedipus, what madness caused you to do this, to give yourself this heavy punishment? Look at you, top of 1268, poor ruined one. And I would speak, question, ponder if I were able. No, you make me shudder. Oedipus responds, God, God, is there a sorrow greater? Where shall I find harbor in this world? My voice is hurled far on a dark wind. What has God done to me? Too terrible to think of or to see. And Oedipus has said, night coming on, night like a shroud. My fair winds brought me here. O God, again the pain of the spikes where I had sight, the flooding pain of memory, never to be gouged out. Okay, he can gouge out his eyes so he can't see the results of his killing his father and marrying his mother, but the pain of memory cannot be erased. The flooding pain of memory, never to be gouged out. This is not strange, Caragos said. You suffer it all twice over. Remorse in pain, pain in remorse. And Oedipus said, are you still faithful to me? And Caragos said, what god drove you to rake black night across your eyes? Bottom of the page, Apollo, Apollo. Dear children, the god was Apollo. He brought my sick fate upon me, but the blinding hand was my own. How could I bear to see when all my sight was horror everywhere? Everywhere, that is true. And what is left? Images, love, a greeting even, sweet to the senses. Is there anything? I mean, this is really despair. Lead me away from Thebes. Lead the great wreck and hell of Oedipus, whom the gods hate. And the Caragos said, your misery, you are not blind to that. Would God you had never found it out. And Oedipus says, death take the man who unbound my feet on the hillside, delivered me from death to life. What life? If only I had died, this weight of monstrous doom could not have dragged me and my darlings down. And Caragos said, I wish the same, never to have come here with my father's blood upon me, to have entered that wretched bed. And Caragos finally says, I do not know what words to offer you. You are better dead than alive and blind. Oedipus says, bottom of the page, 1269, do not counsel me any more. This punishment that I have laid upon myself is just. If I had eyes, I do not know how I could bear the sight of my father when I came to the house of death, or my mother when I have sinned against them both so vilely that I could not make my peace by strangling my own life. You know, they wonder, why didn't he just kill himself? Well, he couldn't go to the underworld with eyes that he might see his father and his mother. Or do you think my children, born as they were born, would be sweet to my eyes? Never, never, nor this town, for I, thrice miserable, have condemned myself to enjoy these things no more. By my own malediction, I have defiled everything. And he said, if I've blinded myself, but about line 1331, if I could have stifled my hearing at its source, I would have done it and made all this body a tight cell of misery. If he could have just bound himself in his body with none of his senses working, blank to light and sound, so I should have been safe in my dark mind beyond external evil. And then he asked the mountain, Kedron, why did you shelter me when I was cast upon you? Why did I not die? And Corinth, oh, the city I believed was the seat of my birth, I am sick in my own being, sick in my origin. And then he remembers the 3 roads and how he'd spilled his own blood by spilling his father's blood, and all the mess he has made. 1271, he wants to leave Thebes and be concealed. Line 1360, come, lead me, you need not bear to touch me. Of all men, I alone can bear this guilt. Well, I don't know, I don't think it's arrogance, I think it's really heroic that he says that. And Creon comes in, he'll have to decide the course. And Oedipus says to him, how can I speak to him? What right have I to beg his courtesy, whom I have deeply wronged? You know, we say that recognition and reversal. Well, Oedipus has had recognition and reversal in spades, but here there's another recognition, that when he had accused Creon of being a traitor, and Creon says, I have not come to mock you or reproach you. And then he says to the people, you should not leave Oedipus standing out here with these bloody eyes. This is something only his relatives should see. And Oedipus begs him to send him away, to exile him. Drive me to the country, to a place where no human voice can ever greet me. But Creon says we'll have to ask the gods. But his command is plain. The parricide must be destroyed. I am that evil man. Now, you know, homicide is killing a man, patricide is killing a father, or parricide, matricide, killing a mother, suicide, killing oneself. Creon said, yes, that's the sense of it, but I want to talk to the gods. And Oedipus said, you would learn more about a man like me. And Creon can't help getting in a little dig here. You are ready now to listen to the gods. And then Oedipus asks him to give a proper burial to Jocasta. And top of the next page, let me go, let me purge my father's Thebes of the pollution of my living here, and go out to the wild hills, to Catharon, and that has won such fame with me. The tomb my mother and father appointed for me, it was supposed to be my death place, and let me die there, as they willed I should. And yet I know death will not ever come to me through sickness or in any natural way. I have been preserved for some unthinkable fate, but let that be. And then he says, about my children, my sons are grown, but I am really concerned about my daughters. Please take care of them, Creon. And will you let me touch them with my hands a last time? And let us weep together. And great prince, be kind. Could I but touch them, they would be mine again. And Antigone and Ismene comes, and is it my dearest children I hear weeping? Has Creon pitied me and sent my daughters? And Creon says, yes, Oedipus, I knew they were dear to you in the old days. I know you must love them still. And Oedipus thanks him. May God bless you for this, and be a friendlier guardian to you than he has been to me. And they come to him, and he holds them. Come quickly to my hands. They are your brothers, hands that have brought your father's once clear eyes to this way of seeing. Their father has learned he is their brother. Ah, dearest ones, I had neither sight nor knowledge then. Your father by the woman who was the source of his own life, and I weep for you. Why would Oedipus weep for his daughters? You know, they are kind of princesses in Thebes, but the problem is they are children of incest, and will anybody want to marry them? I weep for you, having no strength to see you. I weep for you when I think of the bitterness that men will visit upon you all your lives. What homes, what festivals can you attend without being forced to depart again in tears? And when you come to marriageable age, where is the man, my daughters, who would dare risk the bane that lies on all my children? Oedipus recognizes that he is cursed, and of course they are. Is there any evil wanting or lacking? Your father killed his father, so the womb of her who bore him engendered you at the fount of his own existence. This is what they will say of you. Then whom can you ever marry? There are no bridegrooms for you, and your lives must wither away in sterile dreaming. And then he says, Creon, be a father to my daughters. Since we, their parents, are both of us gone forever, they are your own blood, because of course Jocasta is his sister. You will not let them fall into beggary and loneliness. Keep them from the miseries that are mine. They're only children. And Creon, great prince, give me your hand in token of it. And Creon takes Oedipus's hand. Children, I could say much if you understand me, but as it is, I have only this prayer for you. Live where you can, be as happy as you can. Happier, please God, than God has made your father. Well, Oedipus is in such dire straits, be hard to be as unhappy as he is. Creon says, enough, you have wept enough, now go within. I must, but it is hard. And Creon says, time eases all things. Oedipus, you know my mind then, say what you desire, send me from Thebes. Well, he says, I want to, but since God hates me, Creon says, no, he will grant your wish. And they go and start to go inside, and the children go in. Oedipus says, no, do not take them from me. And Creon, top of 1274, says, think no longer that you are in command here, but rather think how, when you were, you served your own destruction. Oh, that has to be bitter for Oedipus to hear. Think no longer that you are in command here, but rather think how, when you were, you served your own destruction. And then the cargo says, men of Thebes, look upon Oedipus. This is the king who solved the famous riddle and towered up, most powerful of men. No mortal eyes but looked on him with envy, yet in the end ruin swept over him. Let every man in mankind's frailty consider his last day, and let none presume on his good fortune until he find life at his death a memory without pain. One of Shakespeare's plays says, as long as you can say, this is the worst, you can't be sure that the worst is not yet to come. Well, I'm going to stop there, and we'll do a kind of a review. I'm looking at the syllabus here, so I'm assuming that tomorrow, Friday, you're going to conclude this. Then Monday, I'll do a kind of review, and before class on Monday, look over those questions. I don't say you have to write them. And then on Tuesday at 2, we'll have the test on Oedipus, and we'll get going on Macbeth, okay? Please email me if you have any questions, and I probably won't be doing a video tomorrow, but I will be talking to you again on Monday. So take care and have a nice weekend. And I'm going to try to get out of this. I can't seem to do it. So goodbye for now.